There is a kind of man people often misunderstand until the moment he is gone. He is not loud. He does not beg to be seen. He does not walk into a room trying to prove his worth. He moves in silence. He gives with both hands. He shows up when nobody claps. And because he stays calm, people make the worst mistake possible. They think he will always stay. They think his patience has no edge. They think his quiet means comfort. They think his loyalty is automatic. It is not. And when that kind of man finally reaches his limit, it does not look dramatic. It does not come with a warning shot. It does not come with a big speech, a slammed door, or one last fight. It comes like winter. Quiet, cold, final. And by the time people notice the warmth is gone, the choice was already made deep inside him long before his mouth ever said a word. Stay with me, because this is where most people get it completely wrong. They think they hurt him, and that is the end of the story. No, what they really did was wake something up. They pushed a man who loved deeply into a version of himself that no longer wastes love where it is not respected. And once that shift happens, everything changes. Most men like this do not use emotional words for what they carry. They do not say they feel invisible. They do not announce that they are exhausted. They do not sit around asking for sympathy. They just keep going. They keep showing up. They keep fixing. They keep building. They keep holding the weight of the connection, the pressure of the silence, the burden of what is not being said, not because they are weak, not because they are blind, but because they believe in what they are building. They believe if they stay steady long enough, the effort will be matched. They believe if they love clearly enough, speak carefully enough, and remain patient enough, the gap will close. That belief is powerful. It is also dangerous. Because when one person keeps giving and the other keeps taking space, taking time, taking emotional shelter without equal return, the giver does not always leave right away. He adjusts. He lowers his own expectations. He tells himself this is just a hard season. He says maybe it is stress, timing, confusion, pressure, fear. He explains the pattern away so many times that he starts living inside the explanation instead of the truth. And each time he does that, he teaches the other person something without meaning too. He teaches them that they can give less and still keep access to him. He teaches them that his presence can be counted on no matter how little they return. That is how the trap forms. Not in one big betrayal, but in small repeated moments where inconsistency meets patience and patience removes consequences. When there is no cost to pulling back becomes normal. When coldness is met with extra understanding, coldness stops being corrected. When mixed signals are rewarded with even deeper loyalty, the imbalance grows roots. The man who keeps pouring more energy into the relationship thinks he is saving it. In reality, he is carrying both sides so completely that the other person never has to feel the weight of what they are not doing. And this can go on for a very long time. Months, sometimes years. Because when a man like this decides someone matters, they do not matter halfway. They become part of his plans, part of his habits, part of the picture he sees when he thinks about tomorrow. So leaving does not feel casual to him. Leaving feels like tearing down something he has built with his own hands. That is why he stays longer than most people understand. He communicates more. He becomes more patient. He reads more. He reflects more. He asks better questions. He tries new angles. He works on himself. He thinks maybe the answer is one more conversation, one more effort, one more chance to get it right. And that is where many good men lose the most time. Not because they lacked value, but because they kept offering value to a dynamic that had stopped honoring it. Listen closely here, because this part matters. Effort poured into the wrong pattern does not heal the pattern. It stretches it. Every extra ounce of energy given to an unresponsive connection is energy taken away from your peace, your focus, your growth, your future. But in the moment, it does not feel like loss. It feels like loyalty. It feels noble. It feels like love. It feels like you are doing the mature thing by staying calm and trying harder. Until one day, without warning, it stops feeling like love at all. It starts feeling heavy, repetitive, hollow, and then a quiet question appears in a man's mind, and that question changes everything. He stops asking, "How do I fix this?" and starts asking, "Why am I still explaining this to myself?" That is the beginning of the turning point. Up until then, he has been living off potential. He has been responding to who this person could be, what this relationship could become, how beautiful it might be if the effort ever matched the promise. He has been investing in possibility. But the day he stops looking at potential and starts looking at patterns, the picture sharpens fast. And once a pattern becomes clear, it is very hard to unsee. So keep watching, because this is the moment where the quiet man begins to change. Patterns tell the truth in a way moments never can. A single moment can be excused. A bad day can be forgiven. A stressful week can be understood. A rough month can be worked through. But a pattern is a record. It is a trail. It is the repeated proof of what someone does when nobody is forcing them to do better. And when a man with depth finally reads the record, instead of rewriting it in his head, something inside him goes still. He sees the inconsistency was not random, it was reliable. He sees the imbalance was not temporary. It was built into the structure. He sees the emotional effort he kept waiting for was not delayed. It simply was not the priority he hoped it would become. That realization does not always bring tears. Often it brings silence, a very specific kind of silence, not confusion, not sadness alone. It is the silence of a man who is no longer arguing with reality. He stops doing the mental math. He stops making excuses on behalf of someone else. He stops searching for a new angle that will finally unlock mutual care. Because he sees something with painful clarity. You cannot fix a gap you did not create. And once he truly understands that, the old version of him begins to disappear. Not in rage, in calm. And calm, when it is real, is more powerful than most people know. This is where people often misread him. They feel his energy change and call it cold. They say he is distant now. They say he is different. And yes, he is different, but not in the way they think. His heart did not die. His ability to love did not vanish. What changed is access. Before this shift, his care was almost automatic. If someone was in his life, he gave. If they reached out, he answered. If there was a problem, he stepped toward it. If something felt broken, he tried to repair it. That was his nature. Open hands, open time, open effort. But after enough disappointment, that open gate closes. Not out of revenge, not as a game, not to punish anyone. It closes because his system finally learns not to keep issuing emotional credit to people who keep defaulting on the debt. This is not bitterness. This is wisdom with boundaries. This is a man realizing that his inner life is not a public resource. And once he reaches that point, something very noticeable happens. He stops chasing. He stops chasing talks that go nowhere. He stops chasing closure from people who enjoy confusion. He stops chasing validation from people who only value what they almost lose. He says what needs to be said once, maybe twice, clearly, directly, without drama. And then he lets silence do the work that words have failed to do. And that silence is loud, especially to the people who got used to his pursuit. Especially to the ones who thought he would always be there to start the hard conversation, repair the damage, carry the emotional weight, and keep the connection alive by force of will. When he stops doing that, the whole dynamic changes. Because people often take for granted what is always available. They stop noticing the effort that never fails. They stop respecting the presence that never leaves. But when that presence becomes conditional, when that effort is no longer automatic, value becomes visible. And no, this is not about playing games or creating fake distance. That never lasts. People can feel the difference between strategy and truth. This is not performance. This is realignment. A man who once gave too freely now gives with intention. A man who once stayed too long now watches patterns faster. A man who once kept trying now pays attention to what trying is costing him. And the strange thing is, the moment he stops trying to hold everything together, other people suddenly feel the weight of what he was carrying. That is when messages change. That is when energy shifts. That is when delayed effort starts showing up. But by then, something important has already happened. He is no longer hungry for scraps. He is no longer moved by temporary attention. He is no longer impressed by effort that only appears after absence creates panic. What matters most is not what others do when he pulls back. What matters most is what happens inside him when his energy returns home. Think about how much mental space gets wasted in the wrong connection, the replaying, the overthinking, the wondering what they meant, why they changed, whether you asked for too much, whether you should send the text, whether the silence means fear or disinterest or both. That consumes a man slowly. It drains focus from his work, his health, his discipline, his peace. But when he stops pouring himself into a one-sided bond, all that energy becomes available again. And energy does not just vanish. It moves, it builds, it sharpens. He starts showing up differently. He becomes more focused at work. He becomes more disciplined in his body. He becomes more present in his routines. He thinks more clearly. He sleeps better. He speaks less but means more. He stops shaping his day around someone else's uncertainty. He stops waiting for emotional weather to decide what kind of day he is allowed to have. This is where the real transformation begins. Not in the moment he is left disappointed, but in the season after, when the energy he used to spend surviving the wrong bond gets turned into structure. Stay with me, because this is where pain starts becoming power, and most people never talk about this part honestly enough. A man like this does not become stronger because he found the perfect person right away. Often he becomes stronger because he finally walked away from the wrong pattern and put the recovered energy back into himself. That return on investment is massive, and it can happen faster than people expect. In a few weeks, his mind gets cleaner. In a few months, his standards get clearer. In that same stretch of time, he develops something rare, emotional authority. Not control over other people, control over himself, the ability to feel deeply without acting wildly. The ability to want someone and still judge the reality clearly. The ability to care without abandoning his own boundaries. This is the middle ground many people never reach. Some men shut down and become numb. Others feel everything and become reactive. But the man who survives this cycle the right way learns to hold both heart and judgment at the same time. He can feel desire and still say no. He can feel attachment and still step back. He can see beauty in someone without ignoring what is broken in the pattern. That balance changes everything. It changes the way he dates, the way he chooses, the way he handles silence, the way he reacts to mixed signals. He no longer confuses intensity with alignment. He no longer mistakes chemistry for safety. He no longer sees effort as proof when the pattern beneath it still points in the wrong direction. And that quiet balance becomes attractive in a way fake confidence never can. Real standards do not need to announce themselves. Real self-respect does not perform. It does not posture. It does not need long speeches. You can feel it in how a man moves, in what he accepts, in what he no longer explains away, in how quickly he steps back when the energy is off. Many people talk about attraction like it is all lines, tricks, mystery, or timing. But real long-term attraction is built on something deeper. It grows around steadiness. It grows around emotional clarity. It grows around a person who knows what they are available for and what they are not. When a man is overextending, he sends a signal without realizing it. The signal is need. Even if he hides it under kindness, patience, and effort, the deeper message still leaks out. I will keep reaching no matter what. And that signal weakens his presence. But when he reaches the point where he genuinely stops, not as a tactic but because his standards finally woke up, the signal changes. Now he communicates something else entirely. He communicates that access to him must be earned. He communicates that his presence is intentional. He communicates that his peace matters. And people feel that shift. They may not have the language for it, but they feel it immediately. Watch this closely in life and you will see it again and again. This is why the goal is never revenge. The goal is not to make someone feel regret, even though regret often comes. The goal is not to win some emotional contest. The goal is not to become hard, unreachable, or proud. The goal is to build a life so grounded in your own values that anything misaligned becomes obvious faster. The goal is to be so clear within yourself that confusion loses its power over you. Because once a man reaches that point, he enters new connections from a very different place. He is no longer asking, do they like me enough? He is asking, do I even want this? He is no longer trying to earn a place in someone's life by overgiving. He is checking whether that space deserves his time at all. He stops being driven by fear of loss and starts being guided by quality of alignment. That one shift changes almost every outcome. He spots imbalance sooner. He notices inconsistency faster. What once took him 6 months to admit, he now sees in 2 weeks, sometimes in 2 days. Not because he is cynical, not because he expects the worst, but because he trusts patterns more than promises now. He trusts behavior more than potential. He trusts peace more than excitement that comes wrapped in confusion. And that trust protects him in a way endless hope never could. One of the deepest changes happens at the level of identity. Before this kind of lesson, many emotionally deep men carry a hidden belief without knowing it. They believe their value is proven through sacrifice. They believe love is shown by endurance. They believe that if they stay strong enough, patient enough, and loyal enough, the right person will eventually see the depth of what they offered and respond in equal measure. There is beauty in that belief, but there is also danger in it. Because in the wrong hands, sacrifice becomes something people simply get used to. They stop seeing it as rare. They start treating it as guaranteed. After the shift, that belief begins to change, not into cynicism, not into cold detachment, into something better. He begins to understand that value is not communicated by how much pain you are willing to absorb. It is communicated by how carefully you choose where your energy goes. That is a massive difference. It changes romance at its root. He no longer enters relationships trying to prove he is worth loving. He enters as a man who already knows his worth and is now deciding whether the connection deserves his investment. That is not ego. That is healing with structure. That is what happens when a man stops measuring love by what he can survive and starts measuring it by what is healthy, mutual, and real. If this is hitting you hard, it is probably because you have lived some version of it. Maybe right now you are the one carrying the conversation, carrying the patience, carrying the emotional load, carrying the hope that one more effort will turn the whole story around. Maybe you keep making private adjustments to excuse things you would never advise your best friend to tolerate. Maybe you are tired, but you keep calling that tiredness loyalty. Listen carefully. Your depth is not the problem. Your ability to connect deeply is not the thing you need to destroy to stay safe. That is one of your greatest strengths. The problem was never that you cared too much. The problem was that your care had no filter. It had no guard. It had no standard strong enough to stop the wrong people from drinking from it without ever filling it back up. That is what you are learning now. Not how to love less. How to love with direction. How to keep your heart open without leaving your gates unguarded. How to stay kind without becoming easy to drain. How to stay generous without making generosity your identity. Because when generosity is your identity, you will keep overgiving just to feel like yourself. But when self-respect becomes part of your identity too, everything changes. Then kindness becomes a choice, not a weakness. Then patience becomes wisdom, not self-abandonment. And let's go even deeper, because this is where many men need the truth the most. Some wounds do not come from being rejected. They come from being tolerated while you are overgiving. They come from realizing someone enjoyed your effort more than they valued your heart. They come from waking up to the fact that what you called love was partly hope, partly attachment, and partly the fear of admitting that the return was never going to match the investment. That hurts in a very quiet way. It can bruise a man's confidence, not because he lacks worth, but because he tied his worth to how hard he could work for connection. So when it fails, he does not just grieve the person. He questions himself. He wonders if he was too much, not enough, too patient, too available, too intense, too soft, too real. But the right lesson is not shame. The right lesson is clarity. The lesson is that the wrong environment can make healthy qualities look foolish. Loyalty looks foolish in a selfish dynamic. Honesty looks weak in a manipulative dynamic. Patience looks desperate in an unbalanced dynamic. But the quality itself is not the flaw. The setting is the flaw, and once a man understands that, he stops trying to become colder. He starts becoming more selective. That one adjustment preserves his depth while protecting his future. And if you have never heard that said this directly, then hear it now. You do not need less heart. You need better gates. Once those gates are built, life gets quieter in the best way. He no longer feels trapped by ambiguity. He no longer burns hours decoding one message, one delayed reply, one half-hearted apology, one sudden change in tone. He stops living in emotional suspense. He becomes responsive instead of reactive. That is a huge difference. Reactive men are controlled by what happens to them. Responsive men decide what something means and act from their standards. This is where peace starts feeling normal again. He does not need every connection to work out. He does not need every person to choose him. He does not need to force a spark into a future. He can genuinely like someone and still let them go if the alignment is weak. He can feel chemistry and still notice chaos. He can enjoy attention and still refuse confusion. And yes, this changes the kind of people he attracts to. Because when a man stops leaking desperation, he stops drawing people who feed on it. When he stops rewarding inconsistency, he stops attracting those who only rise when they fear losing access. When he becomes clear, stable, and internally anchored, the quality of his relationships changes. Not all at once, not magically, but steadily. The wrong dynamics lose their grip faster. The right ones begin with less confusion and more mutual effort. And if you have ever wanted to know what real power in dating looks like, it is not the power to impress. It is the power to walk away early from what does not fit. There is also a kind of grief in this growth that nobody talks about enough. It is the grief of meeting a new version of yourself and realizing the old one had to break for this one to appear. The old version may have been softer, more available, more eager to believe. He loved quickly. He forgave quickly. He stayed open even when the signs were not good. There was innocence in that. There was beauty in that too. So when he changes, he may miss parts of who he used to be. He may miss how easily he trusted. He may miss how fully he could throw himself into the dream of connection. But maturity is not the murder of innocence. It is the guidance of it. It is innocence with wisdom beside it. It is openness with awareness. It is love that asks better questions before it gives full access. And that version of a man is rare, very rare. Because many people after pain choose an easier road. They become numb. They mock love. They hide in detachment. They call their fear high standards. But the stronger path is different. The stronger path is to remain capable of deep love while becoming skilled at protecting where it goes. That takes courage. That takes discipline. That takes inner repair. And once a man does that work, he no longer needs the world to tell him who he is. He knows. Quietly, solidly, without noise. So when people say they broke him, they usually miss the deeper truth. They did not break him. They revealed where he was still unguarded. They exposed the places where his heart ran ahead of his standards. They showed him the cost of giving without structure. And if he is wise, he uses that pain as information. He rebuilds from it. He strengthens his boundaries. He sharpens his vision. He learns to trust what is shown, not just what is promised. He stops confusing being chosen with being valued. He stops offering permanent loyalty to temporary effort. He stops handing full access to people who have not shown the capacity to hold it. And when he comes out on the other side of that process, he is not smaller. He is stronger, not louder. Clearer, not colder. More intentional. He no longer needs to explain his worth because his life begins to reflect it in the way he works, in the way he trains, in the way he protects his time, in the way he does not chase what is confused, in the way he can care deeply without losing his center. That is the man people notice too late. The one they assumed would always stay. The one they thought would keep forgiving without limits. The one they mistook for weak because he was gentle. And when he finally withdraws for real, they begin to understand what they were actually standing in front of all along. And here is the last thing you need to hear, especially if you are still in the middle of this and not yet out of it. You do not need a dramatic ending to begin changing. You do not need the final betrayal. You do not need the perfect closure speech. You do not need them to admit what they did. You do not need everyone around you to agree that it was one-sided. Sometimes the clearest sign is simple. Your spirit keeps getting smaller inside the connection. You keep shrinking to keep the peace. You keep waiting for consistency that only appears when your distance creates fear. You keep explaining behavior that already told you the truth. That is enough. That is more than enough. The moment you stop needing one more sign is the moment your freedom starts. So if this message found you at the right time, take it seriously. Pull your energy back with dignity. Put your attention where it multiplies. Build your body, build your mind, build your schedule. Build your standards so clearly that confusion has nowhere to sit. And if the right person comes, they will not need to be dragged into alignment. They will meet you there. That is the difference. That is the future. And the man who learns this does not walk through life begging to be valued anymore. He walks through life knowing that what he carries is rare, knowing where it belongs, and knowing that once he gives it with wisdom, not just hope, everything changes.